Good morning, North America. Welcome to Church Talk, lively conversation for all things church transformation. I'm your co-host, Dr. Bill Tenney Britton, in our studio in Columbia, Missouri, the heartland of the U.S. And I'm joined, as usual, by my co-host, author and denominational leader, Dr. Kris Tenney Britton, the area minister of the Northeast area of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ of Mid-America. Try and say that 3 times fast. Good morning, Kris.
Well, good morning, and welcome to Church Talk Live.
Bill and Kris Tenney Britton here today to talk about the 5 S's of a guest-friendly, rockin' great nursery. Now, about 2 years ago, we did the 3 S's of the nursery, and since then, we've been studying and researching and working with nurseries across the United States, helping them to bring it up a level. And so we've expanded this to a full 5 S's of the nursery, and we hope that it's going to be helpful for you to get your nursery into a place where, well, let's talk about the where in a moment in terms of, I thought we'd share 3 tales of some errant nurseries. Some nurseries that we've been a part of, we've run into, and we'll talk about what happens if you don't deal with it kind of things immediately following. So, you want to talk about the first one?
The No Nursery Church?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you go in, you're a young parent or even an older parent. You go into the church, you're sitting down, child's wormy, squirmy, moving around, and you think it's okay, got a plan, planned on it to get there, and going to head to the nursery. And you find out there is no nursery.
These churches that have no nurseries are very often churches that haven't had a young person in them for years, or else they have an old value that is, we want our families together all the time within the worship service so that we can train our children how to do adult worship, so they get used to being sitting still. Well, we'll talk about why that's not such a great thing later. Here's the deal, it's a real problem to have no nursery. The second one, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I do want to say, it is a real problem. But again, I'm always hearing pushback, right? I know what y'all are thinking. And there are some out there that are thinking, well, come on. I go to a church and we don't have a nursery, but if that's okay, my guess is that you are one of many parents that are there. There are some churches where I've seen the parents take turns and they put blankets out there and it's just like a raucous free-for-all in the church. So that may be the one time where you can get away with not having a nursery if you've got children.
With this caveat,
yes.
And I'll say there's a huge caveat. If you're looking for unchurched parents, give it up. They're not doing it.
Right.
They're not doing it. If you want to attract people who are used to that kind of thing and have a mindset like you, and you think there's a lot of folks like that out there in your community, then great, you go for that.
Well, and in some small, very, very teeny tiny communities, okay, where there's a complete cohesion, very family type communities, you may find it. I do. I'm thinking of a church where it works. But I'm also thinking of hundreds of churches where it doesn't work.
Yeah, the problem with the exception is that every church thinks they're the exception.
Yeah, you're not the exception.
You're not. I mean, the reality is...
I won't even tell you who you are if you are.
Right. The majority of young adults, if they come to church and they're unchurched, they expect a nursery. So let's talk about the next one. And this one actually, I can share that this happened very, very, very recently. That my daughter and I went to a church with our grandsons, and we went to this lovely country church and showed up, and they had a very nice nursery, but they had no attendance for it. They had no one to take care of it because they hadn't had any young people in their church in forever. And so there's a nursery with no one to take care of it. And they did resurrect someone, a lovely woman who went back there and took care of it, but they had to make arrangements. And if you're a young parent looking for consistency and looking for something that you can count on, it sends a different message.
Well, and in a lot of settings, parents are very, very nervous, and well so, about security and safety, which we are going to talk about in this program. But you need to know that if you've got any kind of concerns about safety and security for for children, then you don't just leave your child with anybody that you don't know. And if someone has been, I like that word, resurrected, chances are they haven't had background checks. They're not okay. And let's face it, in most school systems today, you have to go through background check just to get to be a volunteer in a classroom. And parents are really concerned about leaving their children with somebody, one body that's not been background checked.
Right, and there's a number of issues with this whole scenario, which we will cover as we talk about the 5 S's.
All right, one more scenario.
And the one more scenario, you want to run with it?
Sure. Well, this is a church that has a nursery, but where the parents don't feel safe or feel good about leaving their children there. One church we worked with a number of years ago had one of those nurseries, and we couldn't figure out why the parents kept bringing their children into the worship center when there was a, quote, perfectly good nursery. And some of the children were in the nursery, but there were more and more increasing numbers of not. And as we did the interviews with those parents, trying to get to what it was, it turned out that they did not feel good or safe with that nursery setting. And that may be, well, what do you call it? The parent test. So
they failed the parent test.
Yeah, that's the concern, is when your nursery would fail the parent test.
Now, I want to say that there's a moral to all 3 stories. That if you have no nursery, you have no attendance for your nursery, or your nursery passes or fails the parent test, then the moral of the story is you're not likely to have very many young parents, and you'll have very few new unchurched young parents coming and returning. They may come once, but they're unlikely to return twice.
Right.
Now, I want to just do an end around up front by saying that I've worked with a number of churches that don't have a place, or don't have the resources, if you will, for a nursery at this point, or they don't feel they want to put the resources into a nursery because they have no one there yet. And they say, we'll get a nursery when we need it. If you're planning on reaching young families, if you need to reach young families, if you hope to attract young families, you need it before they get there, because once they come, if it's not there, they're not returning. They don't live on promises of what might be there someday, sometime. If you're looking for and plan on reaching these young folks, get it up to snuff now.
You know, every year, you need to watch Field of Dreams with Kevin Costner. It is a great movie, yes, and on a lot of different levels, but it's really great about build it, maybe, and they'll come. That doesn't always happen, but build it so they'll come. So, and these are the cases, you've got to build a nursery ministry.
So,
5 S's.
Yeah, let's talk about the 5 S's, okay? And the first S that we're going to talk about is staff. That's the one we didn't have before, but staff is the first S of nurseries. Right. And these aren't in any particular order, with this exception that this is probably the most important from the beginning, is you have to have staff for your nursery. Again, if someone shows up at your church and you don't have any staffing, yeah, you got a problem. So, right off the bat, your staff always must be, please hear me, must be at least 2 non-related adults. They can't be husband and wife. They can't be sister and brother or any sort of familial relationship. And there's a number of good security reasons for that, not the least of which is one won't be covering for the other. One, there will not be a power differentiation, and that's critical. And I know you know your people, you love your people, but you only have to have one person mess with a child in an inappropriate way to totally undermine everything you've done.
Or one parent to accuse one person of messing with a child.
Right.
I mean, this is for as much protection for children or as much protection for the adults as it is for the children. We call it the rule of 3, that you always have 3, 2 adults and then the child. And so or the children as the case is, but that you know, it's never just alone with anybody. You're always covered. And there are real specific guidelines for the number of staff people that you need for the number of children. When you're talking about the itty bitties, well, and even they say the older children, you never have more children than people can carry out. So when you've got the itty bitties, one adult, if they're real itty bitties, you can't really carry much more than 2 because you got to support heads. But and 3 at the absolute maximum.
So 2 adults, non-related. The other thing you want is consistency.
Yes.
These little ones get to know you, and we'll talk more about that when we talk about Sizzle, but they get to know the attendants, and they need to build some relationships if they're going to feel good about it. And one of the things that I go to a very large church on a regular basis, and they rotate almost weekly, and the kids don't have the opportunity to build those relationships, and that's really, really sad for some of the big churches. So my recommendation is that if you have 2 adults, you do 8-week shifts. Yeah. So, and you rotate them in the middle. So you have 4 weeks where you have the same 2 people, then one person changes. So you have 4 weeks with one person who's always been there and now a new person, and you rotate off. So you need at least 3 or 4 people who are willing to do the rotate. And again, not every other week, not every 4 weeks, but every 8 weeks, so that you can build the consistency, because those relationships are incredibly important for these children.
Well, and when you're watching children, they take all of your attention, and if you're having to get acclimated to the new policy or your new surroundings, you may have, we have kids in our home all the time, but when we go and we fill in a nursery, even though we're used to dealing with children those ages, we still have to get, again, acclimated to that setting. Where's the changing table? Where are their diapers? How does that work again? How do I know which one is there? Where do you keep the bottles? You got all those details, and so you've got to have somebody there who's ready to go. And this other, if again, as you're saying, if you're always changing over, then everybody's confused. We did that actually, Christmas Eve service. We did some volunteer time, and all of us in that nursery were newbies in there, with one exception, and that person hadn't been in there for a couple of weeks. She kind of knew the policies, but.
Right, exactly. So there you are. All right. Go on. Next.
So let's talk about that staffing, and that those adults need to be adults. You may be able to use youth for backup if you need some extra hands. That's okay. You want to be careful, though. A lot of churches, again, youth are in that nursery because they don't want to go to church, or they don't want to go to Sunday school, or whatever. This is not the case. They need to be in rotation, and I would definitely say that's when you rotate. You rotate those youth, but it is not an excuse to be in there. And there's nothing more disconcerting for many of us to go in there and to see that the youth babysitters, that's the difference between a nursery ministry and babysitting, right? We want ministry. What we do in church is ministry. And people come there for ministry to and with their children, even the littlest ones, not babysitting.
Well, and when it comes to youth, one of the keys to remember is that they cannot be one of the 2 adults. You cannot replace one of the 2 adults with a youth. They can be the 3rd hand, they can be a 4th hand, but the 2 adult rule remains. 2 adults with your kids, and then youth. And again, you want to be aware of that family relationship,
that's it.
Because
Good.
there's a power
dynamic
that can be misused in some cases, and you just want to block that possibility.
Sure, it's one thing if they're cousins. I think you can get away with that, or a niece or a nephew. But give the parent a break from their kid, and give the kid a break from their parent. Let them
or
be on
siblings.
their own. Yeah, or their oh my gosh, yeah. Well, that's that 2 unrelated
Right.
youth, right. In there. Well, let's if we can keep moving,
Right, yeah.
right? Okay, so I want to talk a minute about background checks, and again, we get so much pushback, but so much support for this. It's one or the other, and the reality is there are a lot of people you think you know and you don't. And I find that there are a lot of pastors you think you know and you don't. And so those background checks are really important. And there are a number of ways you can do that. There are services that can do that. You can do state patrol checks and sign on with the state patrol. In some states, those are still free, I believe. In others, it's a very small amount of money. Your insurance company, particularly if you're insured with something like Brotherhood Mutual, Church Mutual, the insurance board, they have very specific information to help you about background checks in your setting.
You must have them, period. There's no exceptions here. You got to have a background check on every adult who works in there. No sense in doing them on the kids because they can't release this. Juvenile records are sealed.
Sure. Well, and you just do policies, and so you have a policy, and that's what you say. And more and more churches have packets that if you'd like to be part of our nursery ministry, then please fill out this packet. And again, I can hear some of y'all saying, but we're just a small church. No one's going to do that. Some people are going to be offended. You know what? There are a whole lot of folks that aren't going to be offended. And the ones that are going to be offended, they got a problem. And my question is, do you really want them working in your nursery?
Well, and
in your ministry.
The other thing is if you're a small church, you'll stay a small church, and
right.
you'll continue to get smaller if you don't get real with reaching young families.
And the next generations, right?
That's
We've
right.
got to keep the next generations coming. Okay, say
That's
some
right.
training.
Okay, all right. One of the things that you need to be providing or get provided, if you can, is Red Cross babysitting training for your youth. If the youth is going to work in there, you need to get them trained. Now, it would be fabulous if you get your adults to go, but we understand the pushback from that because they're sitting in a room with a lot of teenagers and yada yada.
Make it a day.
Yeah,
Be a kid again.
Yeah, but if you can't, don't worry about that because at least one and probably both of your or all of your adults should have CPR training for both children and infants.
Right.
That which is, by the way, essentially normally 2 different classes. You need to get that training as well. At least one on every shift should have that training.
First aid and CPR.
Yeah, first aid and CPR.
First aid, and usually those two do come together, not
Right.
always. I wanted to say something else with that. Oh, yes. If you have enough or large enough folk that are interested in it, and there's ways, of course, that you can spin this to get everybody, whether they're doing ministry in the church or not, you can often get a Red Cross person to come to your church and hold the training for you there. So that's often an added bonus and a little arm twisting to get more people signed up to come.
All right,
Okay.
next, safety. We want to talk about safety, and we talk about this on a regular basis, but you would be surprised. I have plenty of pictures, none of which I'm going to show in this episode because I've done consultation with these churches, but have failed the safety test when it comes to working with churches and in their nurseries, and that's just, that can't happen.
I just want to give a little test, okay? True or false? It is okay to have cribs with drop-down sides. It's false.
False. It's against the law to have them. After 2012, you can't have them at all. You can't buy them, purchase them, nor can you modify them now.
Right, they're not modified.
They're against the law. Get rid of them, and get rid of them soon. Buy new cribs if you have this kind of cribs, and you want to do it before a new parent comes, sees them, and turns you in. We're a church. We will abide by the laws of the nation.
Right.
Please get rid of your drop-down cribs now.
Moral, ethical, and safety. And even though no child has maybe ever died in there, it doesn't change the fact that you can no longer have them. So show that you care, and please care, get rid of those cribs. Okay, so with cribs, we also want to talk about toys.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
Got to check the toys. And you want toys that don't harbor germs. So
Well, we'll talk about that in a little bit.
okay, you want to go there? So, okay, all right. So you want to check toys for broken, age,
eyes that can be pried off and
my
chewed on or
goodness.
choked on.
Yes.
Lead paint and all the rest of it. You've got to check. If it's an old toy, it probably needs to go.
You want to look through recall records.
All right, broken toys you want to be looking for. Anything that's broken needs to go.
Yep.
Cords and appliances. This is a huge one. I've dinged a number of churches on this where they have cords that can be wrapped around. Everything from Venetian blind cords to plug-in cords, which brings us, of course, to and appliances. Appliances. If you have any appliances. A television, for instance, the cord shouldn't be down, the cord should be up.
And it's got to be somewhere where they can't possibly get to it and tip it over.
They should be mounted on the wall. They should be mounted on the wall. If you're going to have a television there, up there. If you are able to do some reworking, remodeling of your nursery, your outlets need to be 36 to 48 inches off the floor, minimum, although the reality is most churches don't have that option. And if you don't, you want to make sure, and even in the tall ones, you want to make sure you have the safety caps over them, and they need to be safety caps that are difficult for the adults to get off, because if the adults can get them off easily, I guarantee those little kids can get them off as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and no cleaning supplies, nothing where they can, or anything.
No poisons.
No poisons. Yeah. Put them in a closet in another place up on a top shelf. In a closet that will lock. One of the best things you can do, get on your knees and crawl around like a little person, scoot around, see what you see and what you find. After you do that and you make your adjustments, then call a group of parents, have a little party in the space, and then everybody get down on the floor and scoot around and get the parents to feed you back. And be prepared to purchase, or maybe you could donate some of those safety kits pieces so that the whole of your nursery is safe.
Well, let's get to the third S. Sanitize or sanitary, or making sure your sanitation is up to snuff.
It's not about your sanity, eh?
No, it's not about your sanity, although if you have an unsanitary nursery, it could be. All right. First thing you need to think about, and you sort of hinted at this, was the toys. Toys that can't be sanitized, gotta go. I know, we love the teddy bears. We love the dolls with the frilly dresses and the curly hair. They gotta go. I'm sorry, because you can't sanitize them in any sort of effective way. If they can't be sanitized, out they go.
So everything needs to be washed on a weekly basis, and in between children as well. I just yesterday saw on a Good Morning America, they were talking about fast food restaurants and these children play yards and some of the icky, nasty stuff that they've been finding in there. And I never thought about it until they were talking to some of these major food places that have these play yards. They have policies for how they clean on a daily, hourly, some places daily, weekly, and then more regular basis than that. And so that whole idea of sanitation and how you're gonna do that, now we've got these. I'm going to say a brand, Clorox, like a hard surface sanitizer, or Febreze, I think, or Out has one for hard surfaces that you're able to spray. Change a kid, you need to spray. You need to spray before kids come in and after kids can come in. You need to use products that are child safe, that it says around there that they're safe around food and whatnot.
And I will just say that the industry standard is bleach, because bleach is, once it evaporates, is totally safe, and you're drinking bleach all the time. It's called chlorine. And every time you drink chlorinated water, you're drinking some bleach. So, unless someone's drinking it straight, it's very, very effective. So bleach water, use the Clorox wipes, whatever, that will take care of it. Okay, we want to talk about washing bedding.
Yeah.
If a child sleeps in a bed, if a kid lays down in a crib with bedding on it,
or a playpen or a play yard,
right? If it's got bedding, it's got to be washed after it's used.
Right.
Period. This is how it has to be. Hand sanitizer.
Yeah.
And I have to say that hand sanitizer dispensers, not the little pump ones, those are nice. Those will work. But the best ones are the ones that are mounted on the walls. And the reason why you want them mounted on the wall, and this is the impress your parents tip,
yes.
You want them in places where parents can see them. So you want one near the changing table, and you want one at the front door where they can see it. Maybe even one on the outside of the door. And by the way, if you really want to impress people, put them outside of all your restrooms on top of that. But it impresses people that you care enough about sanitation to make sure that your children, or your hands are sanitized between holding kids, wiping noses, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I was just at a church real recently, and I went into the nursery and I reached for some of their hand sanitizer, and it was empty. And I asked about it, and it had been empty for several weeks. No. Fill them up. Make sure they're always stocked. You're not impressing anyone that way.
You need gloves. When you change diapers, you need to have gloves on. And really, you need to have latex gloves and non-latex gloves.
And I will say, you don't need latex gloves. You skip latex gloves, go to plastic gloves, and you don't have to worry about latex allergies. Latex allergies is on the rise. Stay away from it. When you change a baby's diapers, I shouldn't have to say this, but if you've got two kids you got to change, you change your gloves between kids. So that's just how it is.
And sanitize your hands.
And sanitize your hands as well. That's right, just for
clean. And do have a place to change them, preferably up off the floor.
Yeah,
exactly. There it is. Okay.
All right. Moving into security.
So let's do it.
And I want to say that this is where more small churches fail than on any other level. They fail the security check. They may have the wonderful nursery, great nursery attendance, safety and all that, but we're just a small church. We don't worry about that. Well, there's a really good reason why your suburban parents, the parents that are moving into your area, aren't leaving their kids in your nursery. Security is huge. Non-custodial parent kidnapping is on the rise, and people are worried about it.
Well, and there's still this expectation. Again, one of our standards could be our schools. And whatever the schools do, how they release children and don't release children is huge. I was in a church not too long ago where I was sitting there talking to a parent, and the child, whoever was doing childcare duty that day, released the kids. And this child shows up in the worship area, in the sanctuary, and the parent just looked and said, "Where did you come from?" And the kid just looks like, "What do you mean by that question, Mom?" But they had not gone to pick up their child, and they were nonplussed that their child, they thought first may have snuck out of the child care area. No, they had been released and not to a parent. "Where's your father?" The mother said, "I don't know. Your dad hadn't gotten him."
All right.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
security issues. Number one, we're back to the 2 adult rule.
Yes.
Got to have your 2 adults minimum.
Right.
That's number one. Number two, you need to limit access to the areas where your children are. Now, when I say to the area where the children are, your best bet is if you have an educational wing, you have to have clearance, if you will, to get in there.
Yeah.
You have to have a reason for in there. Now, if you have an adult, if your adult wing and your children's wing are the same and you have no way of cordoning off, I get that. But if it's, if you have one long hallway, cordon off the back end of it to this is the children's wing, and you can't get past this point without having, checked in or having a child in there or being a checked out worker for there. And does it sound extreme? Yes.
That's worth it.
And you can make that simple. It doesn't have to be a fancy computer system. Right. You can use the little handwritten thing or the raffle tickets. You have to show the ticket, whatever. There's a lot of different ways of doing it.
Sure. But
you have to be checked in. The kid has to be checked in, and they have to be checked out.
Okay, a call system is another necessity. What do you do if a child gets sick, won't stop crying, you can think of all kinds of pieces. All kinds of call systems. I served in a church where we have one of those systems up on the wall, and everybody, just for the first few times you put your child in the nursery, you sat there and stared and didn't hear anything else, and then you got so okay with it, you never looked up there, and
right.
somebody had to come in there to
which is one of the problems
with
those systems.
Right, exactly. There are pager systems like they use in restaurants now that you can get pieces like that.
And very inexpensively, actually.
You can do cell phones. You just get the cell phone and have the parent put it on vibrate.
Here's the bottom line, folks. You need to have policies and procedures.
Right.
You need to have protocols, and then once you develop those, you need to train your staff and train your church that this is how it is, and you don't make exceptions. If you make exceptions for one person or one exception, any exception, then that tells any parent that their child isn't really safe in your care. So this is a big deal. Again, non-custodial parent kidnappings is on the rise, and non-custodial parent issues are as well on the rise. So this is important stuff.
And now let's hit this fifth S, one of the new S's. It is
Sizzle.
Sizzle.
Pop. That's right. It needs to pop. Your nursery needs to sizzle. Now, what we're talking about is it looks great. There's an old adage, you've heard us say it repeatedly if you've watched this, that mama decides where the kids are going to church, and the kids decide if they're ever coming back. So your church, your nursery needs to sizzle. It needs to turn the kids on, but also has to turn the parents on. Right. So let's begin with, let's freshen up your space. Paint job needs to be bright and colorful. Yeah. White or pink or green institutional walls don't make it anymore. And if you have a hallway that you go down, your hallway needs to be decorated. In fact, there's some pictures coming up now, and you'll see some hallways done very inexpensively with just building out the width of a 2x4, the 2-inch side of it, to make facades to turn the kids on and make it look very, very inviting.
Right. Well, we've also seen things as simple as going ahead with white walls in the hallways. Walls in the hall, and from there using construction paper and poster board to do 3D trees. It's amazing what
paper mache
what they're
works
doing.
well.
Yeah, nets when they're doing anything that has anything to do with water themes and whatnot. So you've got all of these different possibilities, mobiles hanging down as well. So use your space as creatively as you possibly can. Bright colors. Murals.
Oh, murals are great, and you don't have to be a real fancy painter to do a decent mural. Basic colors with the shape of a fish and an eye. It doesn't take much to paint Finding Nero on the wall. So. Nemo, yeah, right. Yeah,
we don't want to find Nero.
You want to find Nemo.
Okay, so thematic 3D. There is generally a person who will fight you tooth and nail about painting and that walls need to be particular colors. You fight back. Okay, it's not, this one is worth going to the mat for. Bright colors, easily washable. You want semi-gloss at the very least, or gloss. Yeah, I'd go with gloss.
All right, update what's in your nursery. Update your toys. Think Baby Einstein. Think Montessori. This is the kind of toys that you're after, not just the basic no guns. I mean, that should be common sense, but you never know what you're going to run into in these. And also be thinking about digital introductory toys, toys that introduce the digital age to these kids. Oh, that's not our job. Remember that a recent studies show that over 80% of children under the age of 5, preschool children, are on the internet and are digitally savvy. So, if you're going to have Sizzle in your nursery, you actually maybe need to think about how you can digitize it. Go ahead.
Well, I want to say with that as well, though, that, even simple books, there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing more delightful for a parent to come and to see people sitting on the floor with their children crawling all over them and the laps, and that they're reading a book to them. There's a lot of parents who don't have time for that, and they feel really guilty. So that, that personal touch, that reading, teaching, building relationships. We were at a huge seminar last week, and there is a woman who actually does volunteer regularly in the nursery where our youngest grandson goes. He's 8 months old, and she knows him by name. She recognized him.
But more important, he recognizes her.
Exactly. And so where he's not too wary of strangers, but if he's got a choice between Papa or Grandma when we're out with people, he'll be with us. She said to me, "Oh, you watch the piece." She says, "I'll watch him." And she got on the floor in the bookstore, and we actually sat there. I joined her down there, and then a third woman joined us while he ran back and forth and got hugs and was being held. Had a blast. Right.
Remember that this is a ministry, as you keep pointing out. Right. This is a good place to start building relationships and building a foundation of teaching, even though they don't understand. They understand sooner than you think they do.
Yes, they do.
Begin reading them stories of Jesus and God and how God loves them and so on and so forth.
Well, you don't have to teach them that God loves them. We come into this world knowing that. You just have to remind them, perhaps, and speak on God's behalf in that regard. Well, part of loving them and taking care of them are diaper changes.
Right.
And if you want to do Sizzle in your nursery area and you got diaper kids, you want to make sure that the one thing you do before the parent shows up is
EOS, end of shift.
End of shift. Change those diapers.
Every single one, whether they need to be changed or not, change them all.
Right.
Because, even the tiny little tinkle makes a slightly damp diaper.
Right.
Change them all, and you'll impress the parents.
Definitely.
Really, and that's what
it
it's
works
about, isn't
every
it?
time.
Hey, we're out of time. We'll see you next week.
Have a great week.